Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Vinnie Eastwood Show. We're broadcasting live on AmericanFreedomRadio.com from the fabulously fluoridated capital of Auckland, New Zealand, the island chains nation in the sunny slave South Pacific. It's freaking gorgeous down here, isn't it? And everybody got a part-time job as an incandescent light bulb due to Fukushima radiation so they can help the economy. My very special guest today, and we will be joined in the second hour by another guest as well, is James Wright, formerly a servant to the 33rd degree of the Scottish Rite in Dallas, who is now working for the EU as a kind of a diplomat, and is also an author and leading kind of an investigation to get, well, Freemasonry itself out of politics, which I think would be quite an interesting thing. James, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to be back. How have you been?
Oh, mate, you know, it's been all go 6 ways from Sunday, quite literally.
Right. I hear that. I've moved again and crazy. Just now settled in, though, and I'm back down in Texas, but this time deep South Texas, and it's absolutely gorgeous. Tropical paradise, natural springs to swim in. I'm very blessed at the moment, despite the circumstances. So,
well, yeah, I mean the circumstances themselves. But again, I wanted to talk about the mentality behind all of this, because you have a look at secrecy, and in everyday life, secrecy and privacy, there's nothing inherently wrong with it, right? Because, you know, there's certain embarrassing details about people's lives that maybe they don't want everybody to know about, and you know, it's perfectly fine. People get to keep for themselves, do their private lives, they're not hurting nobody or anything like that. But when it comes to secrecy in terms of organizations, and it's not just an individual anymore, is there something inherently wrong with that, depending on the organization?
Well, I mean, you can look at it two ways, I suppose. I mean, if you're a company on top of your game with whatever your product or service is, obviously you don't want leaks coming out to your competition that might leak, you know, the next up-and-coming product that's going to make you hundreds of millions of dollars. Of course not. But, you know, when it comes to the world of esotericism and these secret societies, which are, let's face it, religions, let's call a spade, it has a very negative connotation, and that so easily and so frequently gets taken over to the dark side. And, you know, when you scratch the surface, you've got a lot of good guys. Your round-the-corner neighborhood Blue Lodge types, they're very upstanding gentlemen, most of them. Problem is with those Blue Lodges is you have these Scottish Rite characters hanging around to the sides, you know, calling the shots, and that's where you start to get into this realm of dubiousness, and from that follows other daunting negative things, as you well know. So,
well, and again, the point I'm trying to make here is about the psychological stasis, essentially, that would draw somebody into these types of orders and indeed believe that they are doing the right thing. Have you ever met anybody who's gotten into Freemasonry, believed that they were doing the right thing, and found it was something different? Or for the majority of Masons, they never get terribly high anyway. The vast majority just maintain at lower levels, and they simply go there to escape their wives. From what I hear about it, it's kind of just more like a dying old boys club.
The baby boomer and World War II generations went for more of the escape and the boys club. Everybody in my age group was there to further their education in metaphysics and philosophy, and they were sort of brutally rebuffed, and as a result, you know, 9 out of 10 threw their hands up and walked out the door and said, "That's it, I'm done." that other remaining one of the group usually rose to at least an intermediary point in the road to where they could see some of the more sinister and sick aspects to the upper management of the craft, and that's why they walked away. So, and then everybody that I directly went through with, my peers in person from my Blue Lodge and my Scottish Rite Valley both, we all fit into that category of sort of like, you know, we saw too much and no more, please, thank you. So, of course, now I only reached that conclusion, of course, after everything came to a head, as it were, and there was a big fallout following that, and they conducted, you know, a sort of a witch hunt, and it was basically to purge the place of a lot of the men whose positions were very highly coveted, I should say, which I believe to this day that the only reason I ever found myself in the position I was in, which was fairly exalted, not the most you can get, but certainly more than any one Mason ever aspires to. And there was a lot of jealousy and you know, so on and so forth, like high school, a real high school type atmosphere and attitude, and infighting, backstabbing, all that kind of stuff. And you know, that combined with the ritual, what I believe to be misguidings, and the sinister occultic overtones, etc., you know, it just made it completely unbearable. And factoring in as bizarre of a situation as I came from, where, you know, I came from a very deeply rooted Masonic family who sort of groomed me for that role, that made it quadruple the issue for me in my personal life when everything fell apart. So that's, I guess, for all these reasons why I feel so passionately about what I do now.
Well, it's like when you lose your current view of the world because of reality breaking it into 1,000 pieces,
yes,
you're left picking up those pieces and trying to stitch them together, kind of thing, to say, how do I look at the world now? It's like a broken mirror, and there's all these reflections of who you were, who you thought you would be, and suddenly they reflect a different image, and you kind of have to, it's like you're looking in the mirror and you've got a different face, like on Quantum Leap or something like that, and you don't know who you are anymore, and you've got to somehow figure out what situation you're actually really in now. What time am I in? What skills do I have? What person am I? Who are my people around me? You know, and I think it's like you only come to those really harsh realizations. As I mentioned on the Dark Occulted Mysticism show that we did earlier, through trauma. And I've had this idea for a while, and I would never do it because it's amoral. But truth or false flags. Okay, what if a bunch of truthers dressed up in stormtrooper outfits or impersonated a SWAT team or something, and SWAT teamed a bunch of other people who they wanted to wake up? You know, all of a sudden you've got a SWAT team coming through your frickin' front door. You suddenly don't care that they're only doing it for your safety. You suddenly realize that you don't feel safe at all.
Well, yes, and there is a very strong and precise science to all that. You know, like we talked about in the Dark Occult Mysticism show previously, Frater brought up an excellent point, which I can confirm with my own evidence, you know, from the things I possess, that places like SRI and these other think tanks and so forth have perfected this to where sort of what you hear, really the David Icke argument is the best I've heard yet without possessing all of the proper evidence, just mainly eyewitness accounts. But it begins with trauma, absolutely. And then once they've done that, they begin to compartmentalize the mind. And I certainly went through that when I worked on the Supreme Council. You know, they used to tell me, like, if I was just, if it was an ordinary day in that building, and I was just doing routine tasks and didn't have any important meetings, and you know, whatever, I could get away with maybe a crummy T-shirt and some shorts or some jeans, what have you, and all that. But you know, I had an office there with a private closet, private bathroom, so I had a change of clothes so I could be ready for anything at any time. And you know, my boss would come in and tell me, "Okay, I need you to be James now," and that was code for, you know, be on your A game, get dressed up to the nines, suit tie, all that, and you know, you have a show to put on and business to discuss. And then he would equally come back and say, "Okay, you can be Jay now," which meant casual, back to my, you know, runabout duties and errands and so forth. And that's what they do. They compartmentalize you, and they get you to try to get you to where they can just say something, and then you go into that mode, and you're basically an obedient slave, you know. And for a long time, I went along with it. I was conscious of what they were doing, but you know, I had that young ambition and wanted to succeed, and so I went ahead and did it. And it wasn't until it got way too abusive and intolerable that, you know, that was it. That's all she wrote. So
it seems like they must be incredibly adept at mind control and in cult indoctrination, and this goes for say boot camp in the military, medical school.
They perfected it into a fine art over hundreds of years.
And the main methodology of which being that they will take your current perceived reality, tell you that it doesn't really exist, and provide a whole new one for you, and then demand that you be grateful that they gave you this new reality and demand obedience over it. And in so doing, they give access to your wealth, sex, and power, which is ultimately what people who run brainwashing and indoctrination missions in life really desire above all.
And you also just unwittingly described going through all of the 32 Masonic degrees.
Mm-hmm. Well, see, it's not unwitting because it's as above, so below. Fractal,
right.
The fractal holographic universe, or as I like to call the conspiracy side of the fractal holographic universe, fractal scumbaggery universe, where you'll look into a scumbag or some incidents of scumbaggery, and all of a sudden you see the pattern repeating itself all the way back through history, but also connecting all the way sideways till it becomes a 360-degree Googleplex of scumbaggery that to which there is no end. There is no end of the scumbaggery rabbit hole, in my opinion. But the thing is just recognizing the patterns and understanding that getting lost down any rabbit hole and losing yourself is a dangerous thing. And don't give yourself up to anybody else.
Well, and you always know when they're up to it, because all you have to do is follow the trails of symbols and numerology. That's very real, and they are obsessed with it, as people have said about them. That's absolutely the truth. I studied that when I was on the Scottish Rite Research Society, and a good example that I like to make in regard to that was the events surrounding the car crash of Princess Diana, you know, riddled with symbology. And you look to something like that, and there's your answer. You know exactly what you can break it down and figure out what numbers mean what, and what points mean what, and where are they geographically, and everything factors in. It's all what they call sacred geometry and Solomonic magic and so forth. And it's their signature is always all over it. So that's how you follow these people. And then they hide in plain sight. You know, this Illuminati business, they're right across the street from the White House in the Supreme Council. Southern jurisdiction, Scottish Rite.
So
I was on another show the other day, and a caller, made a comment about, or was asking a question rather about Skull and Bones. So, well, yeah, of course, but think about this. That's just one fraternity at Yale University. We're talking about the premier global power broker network, the one of the planet. And they are able to call on anyone they wish, be it a exterminator to a plumber to a lawyer to a judge to a member of parliament in a country. I mean, it knows no boundaries. So it's important for me to try and get that message out.
Well, yeah, look at it this way, ladies and gentlemen. If you see something wrong and you don't do the opposite, you're doing something wrong. Just like if you see that the El Presidente B and El Presidente A are the same freaking guy, and if you vote for him, you may as well be declaring foreign wars illegally yourself. We'll be right back. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the Vinny Eastwood Show on AmericanFreedomRadio.com. Currently have people from all over the world tuning in for a number of different countries. Welcome. Good morning. Oh, well, and just like what was it? Jim Carrey said in the Truman Show. In case I don't see ya. Good afternoon, good evening, and good night. Now, my very special guest, James Wright, coming in us live from an undisclosed, undiscoverable Freemason panic room bunker.
What's your line about this having a sense of humor? Sorry, carry on.
No. I was just trying to get you to laugh, and I've already achieved it.
Wait, no. Okay, I'll one up you. Hold on. Let me push this button and see if you can hear it.
Nope. No, I can barely hear it, man. You'd have to hold it right up to the microphone if you wanted us to hear it. Heard it in the background, sort of thing.
I push a button now on my keychain, and this voice comes in from everywhere. And armed, stay.
Oh, sorry. So, I don't get it. Armed, stay.
Stay your posterior behind. I guess I don't know. It's brand new. I don't understand it. That's why they gave me a remote. You know. All right.
Well, moving on to something that actually does kind of make sense to both of us. Scumbaggery. Right now, and I was just thinking about this kind of recruitment arm. How exactly is there a particular methodology? Who are they looking for when they're going out recruiting for a 33rd degree or any other form of scumbaggery that you might have specialist knowledge of?
Oh, goodness gracious. I wish you would have asked me that during the break, because I could have dug out. I have a copy of their PR playbook, which now their official stance worldwide is "we do not recruit." Their slogan is "to be one, ask one," right? Well, no, they recruit, and we'll just get past that lie right now. They target, when I was on board, they were targeting, and I'm assuming that has not changed. Usually right now, guys about approximately 20 to 35 who have usually like a grandfather linkage or perhaps an uncle linkage to the craft. And, they go after them and sort of paint a picture that, this can really help them as a young adult get established in the community and the business community and do some really great networking and so on and so forth. Well, what they don't seem to be able to understand in their infinite wisdom is these guys are coming in because they want and crave to have mentors who can help educate them, help point them in the right directions of the metaphysical, the esoteric, the philosophical, etc. and there's a lot to be said for life experience in that form. I'm a proponent of it, at least, and I enjoyed that component of that. But they're being turned away. You know, the Supreme Council is more and more purging their public image of having any ties to the occult because of the image that's always sort of tainted them as a result of that. And so, like, just last year, they came out with the new version of Morals and Dogma by Albert Pike. They haven't come out with one in about 50, 60 years now. And this one, though, is abridged. So they've cut out all those references to Lucifer and Moloch and all that sort of thing to make it look like it's just more of a political speech or, you know, a morality speech or what have you. And so they basically cut 500 pages out. It's pretty staggering. And I'm not saying I'm defending Albert Pike. Matter of fact, it's my personal belief that Morals and Dogma, the original version, was direct plagiarism of Dogma et Ritual de la Haute Magie. I may have just messed up my French there, but by Eliphas Levi. And it's exactly the same. That's where you get the original idea of, like, Baphomet, for example. So a lot of these other appendant orders obviously stem from that. And there's this push to go back to sort of a mentality like, again, Albert Pike wrote, how Masonry conceals its secrets from all but the adepts or elect. And they really want to get back to that system of exclusivity, only having a certain elect prodigal sons, you know, next in line for those precious chairs once the elder faction kicks the bucket. So,
seems like monarchical hierarchy to carry on their message. So it's kind of like I'm the king and I write the Magna Carta and I want everybody to abide by the Magna Carta. So I appoint this person here to be my successor, or Kim Jong Il. You know, I mean,
yes.
What we're talking about is could you say that Freemasonry and its ascension process up the ranks is not entirely dissimilar from the way Kim Jong Il appoints his successor?
That is an excellent analogy. Absolutely.
Well, okay. Well, in that case, if they're doing that, and it's similar with this person's methodology, then is the tyranny that they're concocting of similar proportions to their ascension protocols? I mean, like, if you're trying to carry on a message, and pass it down through generations or whatever, you've got to somehow maintain a coercive process to ensure that a course is not deviated. How do they ensure that the course is not deviated? That the agenda continues in a straight line? And what is that agenda?
Okay, well, as far as ensuring, that goes back to, like we were talking about with the psychological constraints, you know, and these guys are largely so fearful of their masters, so to speak, that, you know, the mere thought of, because like in those Masonic charges against me, one of the charges therein is me criticizing Masonry internally. Never mind all the rest of the charges and writing a book and speaking publicly against them and everything else. They're also upset that I had anything bad to say, period, even in the proper behind closed doors context. So that's how adamant they are that they don't want to hear anything about themselves. And then, sorry, I got off on that tangent. What was the second part? It was two-parter.
Well, the first part is, what's this? How do they ensure that only one person gets put in those positions to make those decisions, and how are the people around that person who's now in this new position of power kept in line so that they don't deviate from the original agenda?
Right, okay, so kept in line with the constraints, and then to ensure, I mean, good old-fashioned nepotism, you know? I mean, my grandfather did it. I was groomed for the exact same role. Had everything gone as planned, I'm sure I would have been either the next Secretary General or something very much like it. Probably eventually found my way to Washington, D.C. to set up residence, maybe even one day speak on the History Channel for one of those blurbs on a program. But, it comes at such a high cost, people don't realize. And Masons don't realize what they're supporting up top. And that's a very, very corrupt system that does seek to dominate. And back to I was trying to tie in Albert Pike. So the most daunting thing in my mind that we are facing right now as we speak is, I know, Vinny, you're familiar with the letter Albert Pike and the Three World Wars. Well, when he wrote that document in 1871, lo and behold, World War I and II ended up coming off exactly as he said they would. And now, I mean, with the geopolitical atmosphere we're experiencing at the moment, it would appear that we're not far off from the way he spelled out number 3, which was getting Islam and Christianity to basically mutually annihilate each other, throw atheists into the mix as well, and demonize them, and just sort of wipe everything out all at once, and start with a clean slate with this one world religion, which would be Freemasonry. And that's when they would finally, if that all were to take place, that is when they would finally exit the closet and say, oh yeah, by the way, it's a religion, But so long as I'm alive and breathing, I'll do whatever I can to see that day from coming. Absolutely not. No. That's everyone's worst nightmare come true in this conspiracy realm of factoids and sometimes not. It's all hidden right in plain sight. And it seems like the more I do this and the more momentum this thing is gathering, the more dangerous it gets for me. But, hey, if that's the price I have to pay, then it's well worth it. Because the world we're leaving to the next generation is in a sad, sad state. It's certainly not the one, you and I are the same age. The world is not the one we grew up in. It's changed that much, that fast. And it's just, in my opinion, going downhill. So, and it starts with this. It starts with these secret societies and their backhandedness, their control over political systems. Cut off the head of the snake, body dies.
So we're talking about Freemasonry as kind of the head of the snake, or rather, it's one of the big recruiting arms. And what I've found is there's an eclectic mix of secret societies where there's kind of like dual membership, kind of like a dual passport. I'm not only a 33rd degree Freemason, I'm also on the Council on Foreign Relations. I'm not only on the Council on Foreign Relations, I'm also on the Trilateral Commission. I'm not only on the Trilateral Commission, I've been to a Bilderberg group meeting, and so on and so forth. So there's these secret control apparatus that are all kind of interlinked and interwoven in many strange and mysterious ways. In so doing, you can't look at any one secret society in isolation, can you?
No, and that's where the most, pardon me, real definition of the Illuminati comes into factor. Is it's an umbrella sphere grouping of these orders. Now, the Scottish Rite is at the top, and that's what I try to get across. You have all the rest of them, obviously, but yes, when I worked there, we used to have a term for those types who sort of pass between multiple organizations. We called them card collectors, as in like a cartoon where a character opens his wallet and the xylophone of, business card holders falls out to the floor and rolls and all that, meaning dues cards to all these different bodies, orders, etc. And, there's people like that, like Frater X, talks about his 5 types of Masons. And that's one of the types, is that one that, they're in it basically for how many certificates can I get on the wall of my office, which in my opinion is for the wrong reason, but that's just my opinion. So.
Well, I think that also what people have difficulty recognizing is that if you've got somebody who's directly in front of you, and says this is the way things are, if you don't verify who that person is, what their history is, what their background is, and who their associates are, you don't really know who you're dealing with at the end of the day. And if that person is in a fiduciary level of responsibility, an elder or a mentor or a leader of some description, the danger of not finding out who you're really taking your orders from is so paramount that I think that the very process of questioning authority at all has been specifically stamped out of people so they can continue doing everything that they're doing with absolute impunity.
Yes, that's their wet dream. They're extremely corruptible. They know no boundaries, because when you get inside the heads of people like this, all rules are off. They don't think like you and I think. There's no constraints. So anything is possible in a world like that, in which they operate.
Well, constraint connotes morality. And what is morality often instilled into people through? Either through experience or indoctrination. So perhaps they're trying to indoctrinate you in their way to forget even your very own experiences so that they can control you.
Yes, well, I mean, back to the family tie-ins. So many of these guys come in because of family legacy, and so there's also that extra desire to please daddy or grandfather or whoever, and that also makes it all the more easy to control them as well.
And daddy, I don't want to go against daddy. Hey, we got Stephanie calling in. I'm sorry, Stephanie, we're just coming to break, so we'll get to you right after this at the VinnieEastwoodShow.com, broadcasting live on American Freedom Radio 5 days a week. We'll be right back, ladies and gentlemen.
If you take an active interest in maintaining the optimum health and well-being of yourself and your family, the New Zealand Journal of Natural Medicine is the magazine you've been waiting for. Having taken Australia and New Zealand by storm, the New Zealand Journal of Natural Medicine is now available in the UK and Europe. Visit www.nznaturalmed.co.uk or call 01626 337 531 to order your copy now.
Do you realise every day we are being put under constant stress from wireless radiation? What's worse is that you don't even know that it's happening. It puts as much stress on our body as if we had a constant viral infection, draining our energy and sapping our strength, or just making us irritable and fatigued. These wireless fields are being emitted from computers, microwaves, mobile phones, power lines, and any electrical appliance. Now there is a solution. A group of research engineers in New Zealand have come up with an active shielding device that shields you from wireless radiation at a cellular level. Blue Shield comes in 3 models, a household, portable, and USB that plugs into any computer. The great thing about Blue Shield is it is very affordable and guaranteed to last. A one-off purchase will see you being protected for years to come. Visit AmericanFreedomRadio.com and click on the Blue Shield banner. Blue Shield, brought to you by the VinnieEastwoodShow.com.
No matter where you live, globalism affects you. Did you know that the Vinnie Eastwood Show has more subscribers than New Zealand Herald TV and is New Zealand's most popular YouTube news channel, where warm-hearted humour and a list of awesome guests talk about crucial issues which the mainstream media ignore? A show where you, the listener, can phone up with questions, comments and suggestions of guests. Vinnie is building a hub to connect truthers with raw information they need to become active. He can help you gain further skills such as website building, producing audio and video, and creating revenue streams in your own multimedia environment. Because Vinnie supports such a wide range of people in the truth movement, he is not government or corporate backed and relies entirely on your donations. Give now, give generously, or subscribe for $10 a month for access to ad-free video archives. Just visit thevinnieeastwoodshow.com and click donate.
Crazy. Just now settled in though, and I'm back down in Texas, but this time deep South Texas, and it's absolutely gorgeous. Tropical paradise, natural springs to swim in. I'm very blessed at the moment, despite the circumstances. So,
well, yeah, I mean the circumstances themselves, but again, I wanted to talk about the mentality behind all of this, because you have a look at secrecy, and in everyday life, secrecy and privacy, there's nothing inherently wrong with it, right? Because, you know, there's certain embarrassing details about people's lives that maybe they don't want everybody to know about, and you know, it's perfectly fine. People get to keep it for themselves, do their private lives, they're not hurting nobody or anything like that. But when it comes to secrecy in terms of organizations, and it's not just an individual anymore, is there something inherently wrong with that, depending on the organization?
Well, I mean, you can look at it two ways, I suppose. I mean, if you're a company on top of your game with whatever your product or service is, obviously you don't want leaks coming out to your competition that might leak, you know, the next up-and-coming product that's going to make you...
found it was something different, or for the majority of Masons, they never get terribly high anyway. The vast majority just maintain at lower levels, and they simply go there to escape their wives. From what I hear about it, it's kind of just more like a dying old boys club.
The baby boomer and World War II generations went for more of the escape and the boys club. Everybody in my age group was there to further their education in metaphysics and philosophy, and they were sort of brutally rebuffed, and as a result, you know, 9 out of 10 threw their hands up and walked out the door and said, "That's it, I'm done." That other remaining one of the group usually rose to at least an intermediary point in the road to where they could see some of the more sinister and sick aspects to the upper management of the craft, and that's why they walked away. So, and then everybody that I directly went through with, my peers in person from my Blue Lodge and my Scottish Rite Valley both, we all fit into that category of sort of like, you know, we saw too much and no more, please, thank you. So, of course, now I only reached that conclusion, of course, after everything came to a head, as it were, and there was a big fallout following that, and they conducted, you know, a sort of a witch hunt, and it was basically to purge the place of a lot of the men whose positions were very highly coveted, I should say, which I believe to this day that the only reason I ever found myself in the position I was in, which was fairly exalted, not the most you can get, but certainly more than any one Mason ever aspires to. And there was a lot of jealousy and you know, so on and so forth, like high school, a real high school type atmosphere and attitude, and infighting, backstabbing, all that kind of stuff. And you know, that combined with the ritual, what I believe to be misguidings, and the sinister occultic overtones, etc., you know, it just made it completely unbearable. And factoring hundreds of millions of dollars, of course not. But, you know, when it comes to the world of esotericism and these secret societies, which are, let's face it, religions, let's call a spade, it has a very negative connotation, and that so easily and so frequently gets taken over to the dark side. And you know, when you scratch the surface, you've got a lot of good guys. your round the corner neighborhood Blue Lodge types. They're very upstanding gentlemen, most of them. Problem is with those Blue Lodges is you have these Scottish Rite characters hanging around to the sides, calling the shots, and that's where you start to get into this realm of dubiousness, and from that follows other daunting negative things, as you well know. So,
well, and again, the point I'm trying to make here is about the psychological stasis, essentially, that would draw somebody into these types of orders and indeed believe that they are doing the right thing. Have you ever met anybody who's gotten into Freemasonry, believed that they were doing the right thing, and Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Vinnie Eastwood Show. We're broadcasting live on AmericanFreedomRadio.com from the fabulously fluoridated capital of Auckland, New Zealand, the island chains nation in the sunny slave South Pacific. It's freaking gorgeous down here, isn't it? And everybody got a part-time job as an incandescent light bulb due to Fukushima radiation so they can help the economy. My very special guest today, and we will be joined in the second hour by another guest as well, is James Wright, formerly a servant to the 33rd degree of the Scottish Rite in Dallas, who is now working for the EU as a kind of a diplomat, and is also an author and leading kind of an investigation to get, Freemasonry itself out of politics, which I think would be quite an interesting thing. James, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to be back. How have you been?
Oh, mate, it's been all go 6 ways from Sunday, quite literally.
Right. I hear that. I've moved again, and